1939, Poland. Screams pierce through the deafening roar of artillery. Flames consume buildings, civilians running for their lives. Unteroffizier Heinrich Müller grips his rifle tightly, his hands shaking as he advances through the ruined streets of Warsaw. His orders are clear. Take the city, crush resistance, ensure the Reich's dominance. The blitzkrieg is relentless. German tanks roll through the city like unstoppable beasts, crushing everything in their path. Müller had trained for this. He had been told this war was necessary, that Germany had been humiliated for too long. But standing here, surrounded by the dead and dying, watching the terrified faces of civilians cowering before him, he feels something gnawing at his gut. Müller forces himself to look away. He cannot afford to hesitate. But far from the burning streets of Warsaw, in the grand halls of Villa Hugel in Essen, another man watches the war unfold with keen interest. Alfred Krupp, the heir to the Krupp industrial empire, sits behind his father's massive desk, his fingers drumming against polished wood. The reports are promising. Germany's war machine is consuming steel and weapons at an unprecedented rate. He knows that his father, Gustav Krupp, would be proud of him. Alfred has learned well from his father. War is not chaos. War is not horror. War is business. The Reich has given them full control over arms production. The steel mills, the weapon factories, the ammunition plants, all running day and night, churning out the tools of destruction. Chapter 1. Fast Victory, 6th of October 1939. Soldiers of the Reich. Today, Warsaw falls. The enemy is crushed, their army shattered, their leaders have fled like cowards. Poland is no more. You fought with the fury of the Aryan spirit, with the discipline of the Führer's finest. In mere weeks, we have accomplished what others failed to do in years. The world now knows, no force can stand against Germany. The Sturmbannführer steps forward, his eyes burning with triumph. Müller stands in the crowd, his hands trembling slightly as he listens to the speech. He doesn't know what to think about it. Memories of his father's stories flood his mind. His father had fought in the First World War in the trenches of France, and had spoken of the horrors he witnessed, the never-ending meat grinder that split men in half, the endless suffering, the bloodshed. But this feels different. The war was quick. The Polish army had crumbled under the blitzkrieg shock and speed. At first, Müller had felt sorrow for the soldiers who died, the lives lost in this new wave of conquest. But now, as the echoes of victory ring in his ears, he feels something else: pride. He is part of a greater mission. He is part of reclaiming lands that had once been stolen from Germany. He stands on the threshold of something monumental. He is part of the Reich's resurgence, and that gives him a sense of purpose he has never known before. The cheers rise around him, deafening in their intensity. The streets pulse with celebration. Screams of joy and fervent calls of Heil Hitler fill the air. The soldiers, the citizens, they are all united in their triumph. With a smile, Müller raises his arm and joins the crowd, shouting out Heil Hitler as loudly as he can, the words burning in his throat. Back in Essen, Gustav Krupp sat at his polished mahogany desk. A faint smirk curved his lips as he reviewed the documents detailing Poland's swift defeat. His son, Alfred, stood beside him, his expression focused, eyes scanning the reports with the cold calculation that had already driven the Krupp empire to new heights. The Polish campaign was a success, father, Alfred said, his tone measured yet tinged with satisfaction. The demand for tanks, artillery, and ammunition will skyrocket. This war will fuel the Krupp empire like never before. Alfred's lips curled into a thin smile. And we will be there to collect. The Reich needs our weapons. They will be unstoppable. Gustav turned to his son, his eyes gleaming with ambition. The world will soon see Germany's power, and the Krupp name will be at the heart of it. We will ensure the Reich's victory, and in doing so, we will ensure our place at the top. The two men stood there, the weight of their empire's future hanging in the air like a dense fog. The world was changing, and the Krupps were positioned to profit from it immensely. The victory over Poland was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Dead Man. 1943. Stalingrad. It is over. Müller lies in the snow, his rifle slipping from his frozen fingers. Around him, the remnants of the German Sixth Army are surrendering. Hollow eyes, starving bodies, the once mighty Wehrmacht broken. He does not understand how it came to this. They were supposed to be invincible. The mighty German army reduced to scavengers begging for food, for mercy. As Soviet soldiers round up the prisoners, Müller looks at his hands. They are shaking again, just like in Poland, just like in every battle since. Lining up for interrogation, a large artillery cannon rolls past him. He blinks, barely registering the sight in his dazed state. He sees it clearly, engraved on the side, made by Krupp. His mind drifts for a moment, and he wonders if anyone from the Krupp family is here on the battlefield too. Perhaps someone who, like him, was a part of this war machine. But there isn't. While Müller is terrified, unsure of what will happen to him next, the Krupps are far away, seated at a lavish dinner table. The laughter of the family echoes through their luxurious home, their conversation flowing freely, untouched by the horrors of the war. The world of the Krupps remains distant, separated by oceans of blood blood and ice, the sound of artillery and gunfire muffled from their opulent dining rooms. Mueller feels the weight of the gulf between them. His death, or capture, is only another tragedy to be forgotten. But for the Krupps, the war is a business, a means to power and wealth. And in that moment, he realizes how small, insignificant, and utterly powerless he has become. At the same time, the Krupp family empire is thriving, its power expanding exponentially as the war continues into 1943. The Krupp factories in Essen, a monumental industrial complex, are working at full capacity to supply the ever-increasing demands of the German war machine. By this point in the war, Krupp has become one of the largest and most significant suppliers of military hardware to the Reich. The factory workforce has grown considerably, but not by choice. While Krupp's operations once relied on skilled German laborers by 1943, the need for a larger workforce is met by forced labor, prisoners of war, concentration camp inmates, and workers brought from occupied countries across Europe. Estimates suggest that at least 100,000 forced laborers are now working in Krupp factories under appalling conditions. They work long hours in dangerous environments, subjected to cruel treatment, starvation, and brutal punishments. They build the machines of war while living in squalor, unable to escape the cycle of suffering. Despite this, the Krupp family is detached from the grim realities of the war they help fuel. Their fortune grows with every shell fired and every tank rolled off the assembly line. Krupp's factories alone are producing over 10,000 pieces of artillery annually. The production of tanks, such as the Panzer IV, also reaches staggering numbers, ensuring that the Wehrmacht remains a formidable force in the field. Krupp's influence in Nazi Germany is vast, with the family cementing their position as one of the wealthiest dynasties in the country. From their lavish homes, Gustav and Alfred Krupp look on at the war as a business venture, one that ensures their continued dominance in the industrial world. While soldiers like Müller fight and die on the front lines, the Krupps are concerned only with maximizing their production and maintaining their position of power. For the Krupps, the war is simply good business fueling their factories, lining their pockets, and ensuring their place at the top of the Nazi hierarchy. The suffering of the soldiers, the forced laborers, and the civilians is just a backdrop to their ongoing success. And all the while, the war continues with no end in sight. Chapter 3, The Never-Ending War, 1945, the end of the Reich. The days have blurred into an agonizing cold haze for Unteroffizier Heinrich Müller. Captured in Stalingrad in 1943, he has spent the past 2 years enduring the horrors of Soviet captivity in a frozen, desolate gulag. The frigid winds of Siberia gnaw at his bones, and his hands, once steady and resolute on the battlefield, are now weak and trembling from malnutrition and the unyielding cold. Müller's spirit, once full of pride for the fatherland, is now a flickering flame. His body is gone. His uniform, a remnant of the Wehrmacht, is tattered beyond recognition. He hasn't seen the outside world for months, his existence reduced to the cruel routine of forced labor. Days spent breaking rocks, hauling logs, and repairing the camp's infrastructure under the watchful eyes of Soviet guards. The brutal conditions have left their mark. His mind is no longer filled with thoughts of victory or glory, but only with survival, the next breath, the next moment. At night, he dreams of home of the days when he was a soldier of the Reich, marching with comrades through the streets of Warsaw in triumph. But now, those dreams feel like distant memories, ghosts that haunt him as he stares at the ceiling of his cramped, freezing cell. Sometimes, when the pain becomes unbearable, he wonders what happened to the war he once believed in. Was it all a lie? Was he just another pawn in a greater, monstrous game? In 1945, as the war comes to its catastrophic end, the world around Müller continues to shift. The Soviets have pressed deeper into Europe, and the Allies, too, are closing in from the West. News trickles into the Gulag whispers of the Reich's collapse, of Berlin's fall. But for Müller, it is all too distant to grasp. He cannot fathom the magnitude of what is happening. The war, once a never-ending engine of destruction, is now on the brink of its final catastrophic stop. Meanwhile, far from the Siberian wastes where Müller toils away, the Krupp Empire stands on the precipice of its own downfall. It had been a time of unimaginable power for the Krupps. The factories in Essen had churned out weapons at a staggering pace. Artillery, tanks, ammunition. Every piece of steel crafted in the Krupp mills had fed the relentless war machine. By the end of 1945, the Krupp factories had produced tens of thousands of pieces of military hardware, including more than 10,000 pieces of artillery, over 4,000 tanks, and millions of rounds of ammunition. The Krupps had profited immensely from the war. Their net was estimated to be worth billions of Reichsmark. But by 1945, the world had changed. The bombs that had once rained down on cities like London and Rotterdam now turned toward Germany and Essen. The heart of Krupp's empire was not spared. The once mighty industrial complex was a shadow of its former self. The factories had been bombed relentlessly by the Allies, and production was at a standstill. Gustav Krupp, the patriarch of the empire, may have been nearing the end of his days, but his health had long been in decline. By 1945, he had withdrawn from active control of the Krupp Corporation due to his deteriorating health. His son, Alfred Krupp, had taken on a more prominent role in running the business, pushing the family's industrial empire to new heights. But even Alfred, the heir, found himself facing the crumbling of everything they had built. By now, Alfred's leadership had been focused on maintaining the family's hold on the war effort, navigating the increasingly precarious landscape of Nazi Germany. The factories, however, were in ruins. Essen had been bombed nearly to the ground, and with the war ending, the family's grip on the Nazi regime had begun to loosen. Allied forces were now closing in on the Krupp family, and the consequences of their involvement with the Nazi war machine loomed large. In a devastated Villa Hügel, Alfred Krupp, who had once been a symbol of industrial might, now found himself facing the collapse of his empire. The wealth and power that had once been his were rapidly disappearing as the war reached its conclusion. And with the Allied forces coming ever closer, the Krupp family, responsible for so much of the military hardware that had fueled the Reich, would not escape the consequences of their actions. They were war profiteers, and justice would soon be served. Müller, in his icy prison in Siberia, has no idea of the fate awaiting the Krupp family. But he knows the war is over. For him, the punishment is already complete. The war took his youth, his body, and his spirit. Now, it has taken his sense of self. There is no longer any purpose to the suffering, no higher goal to strive for, just survival. And as the years drag on in the Gulag, Müller is left to wrestle with his past, with the consequences of his choices, and with the realization that, in the end, he had been nothing more than a cog in the machinery of a monstrous, failed empire.